Thank you very much, gentlemen. Great cast on the day. I am joined by Adrian on the Jan of this game, not the Soraka. Don't get it confused. He can switch it up. But the victory over Dignitas this time, a back and forth game. Really just one back, then forth. I gotta ask, what were you thinking the entire game? That was pretty intense from the viewer's perspective.
It was pretty crazy. Like we didn't even know what happened that game. Like I don't know what went wrong, but like we knew we were gonna win late game, so we slowed down the game and like try to minimize loss and not let them break the nexus.
When does that kind of mentality come in? How early can you guys kind of sit back, say, take a deep breath, we got this late game?
We're talking about it the whole game, even in the beginning. Even if we fell behind, we knew we could always come back, so we just played our game.
Absolutely incredible. And you guys have clinched first place now with that victory, an amazing run throughout the split for Immortals. The last few games, your early game has fallen back a bit when the team said we would not let kind of things go to the wayside. We would play every team with the same intensity. What has kind of been happening in that phase of the early game?
I think every team's just getting better. Like everyone's progressing better. Like everyone's just getting really good now. It's going to be a good playoffs.
Good playoffs indeed. That's my final question. Oh yeah, let's do it anyways. Let's keep doing it. How does Immortals feel that they are going to finish out the split in those best of fives for the playoffs?
I think we'll play even better in best of fives. Our champ pool is way bigger. Like the reason like I can play Janus Rockets every game is because I have the biggest champs pool and supports. Like no one else can play Janus Rockets, so I think I have an edge over them.
Boom. There's a call out to the supports there in the NALCS. Adrian, thank you very much for the interview. Congratulations on the win. And we're going to throw it down to the analyst desk for the rest of that game.
Thank you, Riv. Dignitas just doesn't want to let us breathe, do they, when we watch a game by them? A very tough loss. Kobe said it best there. Heartbreaking loss. I mean, after yesterday's and then today's compounding on it. And a scary win for Immortals, right? That's not the kind of win you expect from them, and I imagine they don't expect to have to win in that fashion against a team that's sitting in 9th place. So I want to walk through this because there's plenty to talk about. Let's start with the way that Dignitas created a lead for themselves. I mean, most of the guys on this roster look to be playing stellar League of Legends for the first 30 minutes of this game.
Yeah, I mean, they countered Immortals almost everywhere they went. The first blood where Kirei shows up in time to save a shifter and they turn around, they get a kill. The next time, as soon as Pobelter hits 6 and looks to go top, Dig makes a play bottom on the other side and picks up a couple more kills. Billy Boss is able to get out, and it looked like they were just countering them everywhere they went.
Yeah, and I also think that a lot of this started in Champion Select as well. Like you saw the WAD come out first round for Immortals, so you're eventually going to pick that Rammus, and you know you're playing into Sivir, so you pick Braum, whose Unbreakable blocks the bounces of Sivir, it blocks the boomerang blade through it, so you have a good laning phase with that, and you have follow-ups for when they actually dive it. It's just that late game that ended up being a problem because they stopped playing to their win condition. They stopped having Billy actually push and flank and actually start things and get turrets, so it ended up kind of floundering later on, and then Sivir just runs down Jhin.
Yeah, we saw many examples of good fights by Dignitas taking the inner turrets, you know, leading up to those inhibs. Then they struggled a little bit more to get the first 2 inhibs down, but they did do it. They got them down. And then we end up at the top tier inhib. And this is where I want to jump to a replay that we have because maybe this is the opposite of what was happening yesterday, where they were too afraid to pull the trigger. Now it seemed as though they were being a little bit too impatient in today's fights and closing out the game.
Yeah, they pretty much get all of the turrets. They're ready to take this 3rd inhibitor, so Immortals are almost on their last stand here. And then everybody from Dignitas runs up while Turtle says, okay, well, I can get a lot of bounces here. Look at those crits that are going off the back line there. And because everybody on Dignitas was grouped up, he's able to just W after he pops his ultimate and run down. And the thing is also the Sivir and Janna combination. Sivir gets to run forward pretty much with no fear, because if they do counter engage, Janna disengages them, and then they're still able to continue the fight afterwards and kite around. So that was a fight that Immortals said, we're going to pull the trigger on this, and it's something that their coach actually says, you know, I don't worry when they get 5K behind, because they can have these types of fights, and they recognize when to take them.
Apparently, Adrian doesn't worry either. He said that they knew that all they needed to do, that they had made some misplays in the early game, they had gotten themselves into a deficit, but they recognized, they believed they were the stronger team in the late game. It was just about stalling to that point. But this is where we come back to, it's a scary win for Immortals because, again, when we're in the playoffs, a game like that, is C9 going to give them the room to come back in a game like that?
Yeah, I don't think so. Like, saying we stalled out for late game is a little bit of a stretch considering that, you know, they gave up 2 inhibs and got, like, trounced in the number of team fights. So it's not like they were stalling. It was like they were losing.
Right.
And then Dig started messing up.
Yeah.
And there's a distinction to make there, I think.
There's also a couple things in this game that were really not sitting completely well for me in Champion Select because we know Immortals to be a team that's countering, and they picked their top really early on.
Okay.
So they put themselves in a deficit in the top lane, and then they also showed their AD carry very early that then got countered by the Braum. So they had multiple losing lanes, which is something that you don't usually see Immortals setting themselves up with, because usually they just play for that. Usually they play to win lane and then win the game from there and work on their team fighting and their skirmishes. So I don't know if this is what's going to happen more often for them. I think there's a little bit of a drafting error for Immortals here, but I think that Dignitas played that first part of the game so well that it took them off guard that if that happens again to Immortals, well, I don't know if they'll close out, even with a better draft.
Right. It's reminiscent of a Renegade situation in that, okay, the early parts of the game played incredibly well by Dignitas. I mean, for them, it even extended into the mid game. They had total control of that game through the second inhib being down, and then it was almost like an overcompensation for yesterday's very long game in which they lost. They decided they wanted to pull the trigger more often than laying poke from the Corki and the Jhin before engaging and ending up in a full 5v5 team fight with everyone at full health when they could have waited for those other side lanes to push in.
Yeah, and the fights started being different too. A lot of the fights started off with really well-placed ultimates from Gragas, and that like would isolate a person or two, and then they could kill the people after that. And the last couple fights were very different from that, where it looked like they kind of just wanted to walk up and hit the turret, and then they would die.
Very forced fights at that point where they throw out the abilities aren't landing correctly, they were still moving forward and trying to advance, and that's where they got punished by Sivir.
Well, tough week for Dignitas, to say the least. Immortals scraping by with a victory in that game. There's still one more game, so keep it tuned right here for Echo Fox versus Counter Logic Gaming. We'll be right back in just a few minutes.
You're my friend.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Huni, what am I to you?
You're my friend.
Huni, my boy.
I thought you were my boy, dude. Yeah, what's up?
Me and Huni share a pet, by the way.
I know.
Rain over flash, knockup. Pobelter with a flash stun of his own. Cleanse gets shifter back. Oh! Rain over slow. He goes down to Kirei's counter.
I'm queuing.
Adrian.
We go Jenna. Get Jenna.
I'll slow him.
Adrian is going to get a quick monsoon, but the curtain has fallen. Adrian's time is... Oh, it's still going! He missed the last bullet. Over's in the front. Pobelter's doing fine. Billy Boss isn't able to finish him off. Adrian leads the charge with Turtle. And Immortals are turning it around.
It's happening
It's going to